Someone screamed, "Get him out of here," before anyone caught the old man's name. A woman in sharp heels stood over him, nose wrinkled, phone already rising. He'd fallen near the entrance, coat torn, shoes split at the toes. Two co-workers laughed. Nobody reached to help him. Then a young man in a stained uniform broke from the crowd. Marcus knelt beside the stranger without asking permission. "Sir, are you okay?" His voice held no pity, only steadiness. He lifted the old man by the arm, slow, careful. The woman scoffed. "Why waste your time on trash like him?" Marcus didn't flinch. "Everyone deserves someone in their corner." The old man gripped his sleeve and murmured something low. Something about owning more than anyone in that parking lot could imagine. The woman rolled her eyes. Someone muttered that he was clearly delirious. By 9 tomorrow morning, every person watching would learn exactly who he was. Marcus handed over his water, then his lunch, then, quietly, the only key he owned, to the one room he called home. The old man's hand trembled taking it. Inside the building above them, a decision was already forming, one that would end a career before lunch. He looked at Marcus for a long moment, studying him like a man memorizing a face he'd need later. Then he asked one question Marcus couldn't answer yet. What neither of them knew was that this single choice would crack open a heart that hadn't trusted a soul in years, drag loose a secret the company had buried since its founding, and rewrite the futures of everyone standing in that parking lot. All 31 of them, before the sun rose again. Welcome back to Houseboy TV. If stories like this move you, hitting subscribe helps us keep making them, and a like tells us you're here. Where in the world are you watching from tonight? Now, back to that parking lot, where nobody yet understood what they'd just witnessed. Marcus half carried the old man across the lot, one arm looped beneath his shoulder, feeling how light he was, how the coat hung off him like it belonged to someone twice his size. "Careful now," Marcus said. Almost there. The old man's breath came ragged, but his eyes moved fast, taking in everything. The cracked pavement, the dumpster behind the loading dock, the narrow metal stairwell Marcus led him toward, the one the office workers never used because it smelled like motor oil and old rain. Behind them, the woman in the heels was already walking away, phone pressed to her ear, laughing about something else entirely. She had already forgotten him. That was the part that stayed with Marcus longest. Not the cruelty itself, but how quickly it passed through her, like weather. He got the old man to the bottom of the stairs and stopped to let him catch his breath. "You don't have to keep doing this," the old man said. "Helping me. I know," Marcus said. "That's not really a reason to stop." The old man studied him for a moment, the way a man studies a signature before he decides whether to trust it. They climbed the stairs slowly, one step at a time, Marcus's hand never leaving the old man's arm. At the top was a door with peeling green paint and a number worn down to a ghost of itself. Marcus pushed it open with his shoulder. The room inside was small enough that 4 steps crossed it end to end. A cot against the wall, blanket folded with more care than the blanket deserved. A single bulb hanging from the ceiling, its light the color of weak tea. A metal shelf held 2 plates, 1 cup, and a photograph in a cracked frame. A woman with Marcus's same eyes, smiling at something outside the picture. The old man stood in the doorway and did not move. "It isn't much," Marcus said, already pulling the blanket straight, already fluffing the single flat pillow like it might somehow become 2. "But it's warm enough, and nobody bothers you up here. Where will you sleep?" "Floor's fine. I've slept on worse." The old man's jaw tightened, just slightly. A small motion Marcus didn't notice, but the camera would have caught if there had been one. He lowered himself onto the cot with visible effort, and Marcus knelt to loosen the laces on his ruined shoes, the way you'd do for someone who couldn't bend that far anymore. "Let me pay you," the old man said suddenly. "For the room, for the food." Marcus shook his head without looking up. "I didn't do it to get paid. Everyone can use money." "I can use a lot of things," Marcus said. "Money's not the one I'm short on tonight." The old man opened his mouth again, and Marcus watched something shift behind his eyes. Some old habit trying to reassert itself, the reflex of a man who had spent 30 years believing every problem had a price attached, and every kindness was secretly a transaction waiting to be closed. He reached into his torn coat pocket and came out with a crumpled bill, holding it toward Marcus like a peace offering. Marcus looked at the bill, then at the old man's face. "Sir," he said gently, "if you offer me that again, I'm going to think you didn't understand what I was doing." The old man's hand stayed extended a moment longer, then slowly folded back into his lap. Something crossed his face that looked almost like shame, and beneath it, something else. Surprise, maybe. The particular surprise of a man discovering a door that money had never opened before. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "It's the only language I know how to use." "Then let's find you a different one tonight," Marcus said, and smiled. And for the first time since the parking lot, the old man's shoulders came down an inch, like a held breath finally let go. Marcus fetched him water from the tap down the hall, boiled a bit of rice on the single burner tucked in the corner, and set the plate on the old man's lap without ceremony. The old man ate slowly, watching Marcus the entire time, the way you watch something you're afraid might disappear if you look away. "What's your name?" the old man asked between bites. "Marcus." "Marcus what?" "Marcus Reed." He said it like it embarrassed him slightly, a name he didn't expect anyone important to remember. "You?" The old man hesitated. It was a small hesitation, barely a second, but Marcus caught it, filed it away without knowing why it mattered. "Call me Adrian," he said finally. "Well, Adrian." Marcus settled onto the floor with his back against the wall, legs stretched toward the door. "You've got a bed for tonight. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the rest." "Why?" Adrian asked. "Why does a boy with nothing give away the little he has?" Marcus thought about it longer than the question seemed to need. "My mother used to clean offices in a building like this one," he said. "Nicer building, fancier lobby. She'd come home some nights and tell me about the people who looked straight through her like she was part of the furniture. And some nights she'd come home and tell me about the one person who said good evening to her like she was somebody." He picked at a thread on his sleeve. "I always wondered which kind of person I'd turn out to be. Figured I'd rather find out on a night like tonight than wait for some big moment that never comes." Adrian didn't answer right away. He looked down at the plate in his lap, at the little steam still rising off the rice, and something in his throat worked like he was swallowing more than food. "She sounds like she raised you right," he said finally. "She tried." Marcus's voice went quieter. "She's not around anymore to see how it turned out." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the loose pane in the small window above the cot. Adrian pulled the blanket higher without seeming to notice he'd done it, and Marcus watched the gesture, filed that too. A man who flinched from cold like someone unused to it, despite the rags. Down in the parking lot, 3 floors below and a lifetime away, a woman named Priya sat in her car with the engine idling, watching the stairwell door where the beggar and the houseboy had disappeared. She had seen the whole thing from her rearview mirror. The pointing, the shouting, Marcus running toward the mess nobody else would touch. She didn't understand it, and not understanding it made her angry in a way she couldn't name. Marcus had been hired 2 months after her, for less money, doing work she considered beneath consideration, and yet somehow the supervisors already knew his name and mispronounced hers. She watched the stairwell door a moment longer, then pulled out of the lot, already deciding she would mention the incident to someone tomorrow. Not out of concern, out of something closer to appetite. Back in the small room, Adrian had gone quiet, his eyes half closed, exhaustion finally winning the argument his pride had been losing all night. Marcus pulled off his own thin jacket and laid it over the old man's legs, an addition to the blanket, a small doubling of warmth that cost him something and gave him nothing back that anyone would ever see. "Get some sleep," Marcus said. "Big day tomorrow. New owner's supposed to show up. Whole building's been buzzing about it for a week." Adrian's eyes opened again, just slightly. "Is that so?" "That's what I heard. Some billionaire nobody's ever met in person. Coming in to look the new staff over." Marcus rubbed his eyes, laughed under his breath. "Probably drive up in something that costs more than this whole building. Guess we'll see." Adrian said nothing. In the dim light of the single bulb, his face did something complicated, something that might have been guilt, might have been fear, might have simply been the tiredness of a man who had been carrying 2 names for 3 days and was down to his last hour of carrying only one. "Marcus," he said, "yeah, whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to remember tonight exactly as it happened." Marcus frowned slightly, not understanding, too tired himself to chase the strangeness of the sentence. "Not going anywhere, Adrian," he said. "Get some rest." He reached up and clicked off the bulb. In the dark, Adrian Cole lay under a blanket that smelled like someone else's poverty and stared at a ceiling he could not see. And for the first time in 11 years, he did not think about the company, or the board, or the number attached to his own name in the financial papers. He thought about a woman he had never met who had raised a boy to give away his coat to a stranger, and he thought about how close he had come 3 days ago to canceling this entire test as a waste of his time. He did not sleep well. Twice he woke to the sound of Marcus shifting on the hard floor, trying to find a position that didn't ache, and twice Adrian lay still and said nothing, ashamed to let the boy know he'd been disturbed. Morning came gray and thin through the small window. Marcus was up before the light had fully settled, folding the jacket Adrian had slept under, setting a cup of weak tea on the shelf beside the cracked photograph. "I've got an early shift," he said, "cleaning the east wing before everyone gets in. You rest here as long as you need. Door locks from the inside." He paused at the door, looking back at the old man like he was cataloging something he didn't want to forget. "There's bread in the tin if you get hungry." "Marcus?" "Yeah, thank you." Adrian's voice cracked slightly on the second word, an old man's voice, though for once it wasn't entirely an act. "I mean that more than you know." Marcus smiled, easy, unweighted by anything. "Don't mention it. Seriously, don't." He left, and the door clicked shut behind him, and Adrian sat alone in the small gray room for a long moment before he reached into the lining of his torn coat, the one place he had not let Marcus see, and drew out a phone so thin and so clean it looked like it had fallen out of a different universe entirely. He powered it on. 43 messages loaded in a single silent rush. He typed one line to his assistant and sent it before he could talk himself out of it. "Have the black car and the gray suit at the east entrance by 8. Tell no one why." 3 floors below, in an office with glass walls and a view of the parking lot, the woman who had shouted at Adrian the night before was laughing at something on her screen, unaware that in 90 minutes her entire understanding of the world was going to come apart in front of witnesses. And in the small green stairwell, unseen by either of them, Priya was already standing outside the supervisor's office, waiting for the door to open, a story ready on her tongue about the houseboy and the beggar, and exactly what she thought it meant. The supervisor's office opened, and Priya stepped inside before the door had fully cleared her shoulder. "Mr. Bellamy, I need to report something." The man behind the desk was mid-60s, tie already loosened, though the day had barely started. He looked up without much interest. "Make it quick, Priya. New owner's supposed to be walking through in an hour. That houseboy, Marcus. Last night he brought some homeless man into the building. Gave him a place to sleep. In the staff room, over the loading dock." She folded her arms. "I just think, with everything going on today, people should know what kind of judgment he has." Bellamy rubbed his temples. He had run this building for 9 years and had learned to recognize the particular flavor of a complaint that wasn't really about policy. Did the man cause any damage? Steal anything? Well, no? Then unless you've got something else, I've got a building to get ready. He waved her toward the door, already reaching for his phone. Priya left with her mouth still half open, the story she'd rehearsed all night deflating in her chest like something punctured. Upstairs, in the small gray room, Adrian stood in front of a cracked mirror no wider than his hand, running his palm over 3 days of unfamiliar stubble. He had worn worse disguises for shorter stakes. He had never worn one this long for a reason this simple. At 7:50, a black car pulled quietly into the service entrance below, out of sight of the main lot. A woman in a charcoal coat stepped out carrying a garment bag, and rode the freight elevator up without a word to anyone who passed her. At 8 o'clock exactly, the old beggar who had slept in a houseboy's room walked into the executive washroom on the 4th floor, and 12 minutes later, Adrian Cole walked out. Gone was the limp. Gone was the torn coat, the split shoes, the gray stubble scraped clean. In their place stood a man in a charcoal suit that had been cut for his exact shoulders. Silver at the temples, in a way that read as authority rather than neglect. Eyes the same, though nobody in the building would think to check. He rode the main elevator down to the lobby, and the doors opened onto a room that went silent, the way a held breath goes silent, all at once, all the way through. Bellamy stepped forward first, hand extended, voice pitched for the whole floor to hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention. Allow me to introduce the owner of Cole Enterprises, Mr. Adrian Cole." Nobody moved. Near the front doors, the woman who had shouted the night before went the color of the marble floor beneath her. The one who had covered her nose stared at the carpet like it might open and take her somewhere else. The third woman, the one who had simply looked away again now, though there was nowhere left to look. Adrian let the silence sit exactly as long as it needed to. He had learned, over 11 years of running rooms like this one, that silence did more work than any speech he could give. "Some of you," he said, "met me yesterday." In the parking lot, a woman near the coffee station made a small sound, quickly swallowed. "I was not sick," Adrian went on. "I was not homeless. I have never once in my life gone hungry." His voice stayed level, without triumph, without cruelty, the voice of a man stating facts rather than settling a score. "I wanted to see who this company hires. Not on paper, not in an interview room where everyone says the correct thing. I wanted to see what happens when someone believes no one important is watching." He let his eyes move across the lobby, slow, unhurried, until they found the woman who had shouted first. "You told a man to be removed from a building he owned," Adrian said. "You didn't know that. But you knew he was hurting, and you decided that was reason enough to be cruel instead of reason enough to be gentle. I want you to think about that difference for a long time." The woman opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Adrian turned, and his gaze crossed the lobby toward the service corridor, where Marcus had just come through the door in his cleaning uniform, a mop bucket still in one hand, utterly unaware that the whole floor had gone still around a man he'd fed rice to the night before. Marcus stopped walking. The bucket wheel squeaked once against the marble and went quiet. "Adrian?" he said, and the word came out smaller than he meant it to, disbelief folding it down at the edges. "Come here, son," Adrian said, and something in the word son made two people near the front doors look at each other. Marcus set the bucket down, slow, like sudden motion might break whatever was happening. He crossed the lobby with his uniform still creased from the floor he'd slept on, and stopped an arm's length from a man who, 12 hours ago, had needed help just to stand. Marcus started, and didn't finish it, because there wasn't a version of the sentence that made sense yet. "I am," Adrian said. "I'm sorry I let you think otherwise for as long as I did." Marcus's jaw worked. His eyes moved once, fast, over the suit, the silver at the temples, the room full of people watching him, like he was something newly discovered. "You slept on my floor," he said. Not an accusation. Just a fact he was still trying to fit into the rest of what he knew. "You gave me your coat," Adrian said, "and your food, and the only bed you had, and you refused my money twice in one night." He turned to face the room fully now, and his voice rose just enough to carry to the back wall. "This is Marcus Reed. Last night, when everyone in this lobby saw an old man they believed was worth nothing, Marcus was the only one who saw a person." He looked back at Marcus, and something in his face loosened, the last of the performance finally falling away. "Effective this morning," Adrian said, "you are no longer on the cleaning staff. You are the newest floor manager of this company, with a salary and a title to match. And my personal thanks, which I don't hand out easily." Marcus's mouth opened, closed. He looked down at his own uniform, at the mop bucket still sitting where he'd left it, and something in his throat caught hard enough that he had to look away from Adrian entirely, blinking fast at the marble floor, unwilling to let this room see what this room had never once earned the right to see. "I didn't do it for this," Marcus said quietly when he could speak again. "I know," Adrian said. "That's exactly why it's yours." Near the coffee station, the woman who had shouted the loudest the night before finally found her voice, small and cracked. "Mr. Cole, I didn't know who you were." "If I had known that," Adrian said, turning to her, not unkindly, but without softness either, "is the entire problem. You shouldn't have needed to know." He let that settle over the room, let it find every person who had laughed, Every person who had looked away, every person whose kindness had a price tag hidden somewhere beneath it. Then his eyes came back to Marcus, and the hardness went out of his face completely. "Get your things," Adrian said. "Your new office is on the 6th floor. And Marcus." He paused, and for one unguarded second, 11 years of a man who had learned to trust nobody showed plainly on his face. "Thank you for showing me that some people still don't need a reason." That evening, long after the lobby had emptied, and the story had already traveled through every floor twice over, Adrian stood alone in the small gray room above the loading dock, the one he had insisted on keeping exactly as it was. He set a folded blanket back onto the cot, ran his hand once over the cracked photo frame on the shelf, and allowed himself, finally, with no one there to see it, to feel everything the lobby had not permitted him to show. His eyes were wet when he finally spoke, and there was no one to hear him say it, except the small room itself. "Thank you," he whispered, "for still existing in a world like mine." He turned off the light and closed the door behind him, gently, the way you close a door on something you intend to remember. Never judge a person's worth by the coat on their back. Sometimes the poorest room in the building holds the richest heart in it. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. If this story moved you, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and drop a like to let us know you were here. Where in the world are you watching from tonight?